Hi everyone, I'm sharing something very personal today. It's the story of how I found out that my husband secretly married my cousin, all while we were still married. I never thought I'd be in this kind of situation, but here I am, trying to figure out what to do next. If you can, please like, share, and subscribe because this story isn't just mine, it might help others facing something similar. And I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had a moment when someone you trusted completely shocked you? Let me start from the beginning. For years, I thought my marriage was solid. My husband, Raj, seemed perfect, the caring partner I had always wanted. We built a life together, or at least, that's what I believed. Our mornings were filled with small talks, our evenings with plans about the future. I always trusted him, never imagining that behind the smile and kind gestures, there was a secret growing that would shatter my world. One day, Raj told me he was going on a work trip to another state. He said it was an urgent business meeting that couldn't be rescheduled, so I packed his bags for him and wished him good luck. I never questioned it. I mean, who would? I thought he was truthful and loyal, the kind of man who would never hurt me so deeply. But something about the way he left felt strange, a little too hurried, a bit too silent. The goodbye kiss was less warm than usual, and he glanced at his phone more than once before stepping out. A strange feeling settled inside me, though I didn't want to acknowledge it. Later that night, when sadness and doubt kept me awake, I made a decision I never thought I would. I looked through his phone. Yes, I know it sounds wrong. Trust is the foundation of any relationship, and I broke that foundation with one swipe. But I needed answers. I couldn't live with the uncertainty eating me alive. Scrolling through his messages, I found something that stopped my heart. Hidden chats in a secret app, messages between Raj and someone named Anita. At first, I thought maybe it was just a friend or a colleague. But then I saw photos. Wedding photos. Raj and Anita, in wedding clothes, smiling happily as if they were the luckiest couple in the world. And here's the worst part, Anita was my own cousin. The girl I grew up with, who came to every family event. The person I shared secrets with for years had just married my husband, while Raj and I were still living under the same roof. I stared at the pictures, disbelief and pain swirling inside me like a storm. My mind refused to accept this betrayal. How could he keep this from me? Why would Anita do this to me? I felt numb, my heart shattered like glass. But I didn't confront them right away. I needed time to think, to process, because my emotions were raw and wild. Instead of rushing to a confrontation, I started planning. I knew now that I had to be smart, calm, and prepared to fight for my life, my dignity, and my future. I saved every picture, every message, every detail. This wasn't just about personal pain. It was about betrayal on so many levels, legal, emotional, and financial. Raj wasn't just cheating, he was committing bigamy, and Anita was part of that crime. If you're watching me tell my story, please remember this: betrayal can happen to anyone, even from those you trust most. But you have the power to reclaim your life and stand up for yourself. Please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. Your support means more than you know, and I want to hear from you. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted? How did you react? What helped you heal? This story is only beginning. There's so much more to tell, and I promise to share every part of this journey with you. Thank you for listening and for being here with me. Your support gives me strength. After that night, my world felt like it was spinning out of control. Yet, even with my heart in pieces, I forced myself to stay calm. I kept telling myself that losing my temper or acting on impulse would only make things worse. Raj was still supposedly out of town, and Anita hadn't contacted me at all. If they thought their secret was safe, then that gave me time, and I needed every second to figure out what to do. The very first thing I did was gather evidence. I can't stress enough how important this is for anyone going through something similar. I took screenshots of every single message, every picture, every digital footprint I could find. I saved those photos of their fake smiles at their wedding, and even took photos of his stolen wedding ring and travel bookings. I forwarded a backup of all of this to an email account only I could access, just in case. The next step was to confirm the facts. I dug a little deeper into our shared email accounts and bank statements. As I suspected, Raj had booked flights and hotels under the pretense of his business trip. Seeing the payments and the hotel receipts in another state, right where Anita lived, felt like someone twisting the knife deeper. He didn't just lie to me, he used our own life, our own resources, to build his web of lies. I debated whether I should immediately call Raj or Anita and expose everything. But I stopped myself. Confronting them without a plan wouldn't undo what they had done, and it could make things messy, legally and emotionally. So, I confided in someone I could trust, my old college friend, Mira, who is a lawyer. Speaking with her was the first moment of relief I'd felt since the nightmare began. She listened to me, not with pity but with reassurance. She gently told me about the law, how bigamy isn't just a betrayal, but a crime. She explained my rights, the steps I could take, and why it was better to gather all possible evidence before confrontation. Because of Mira, I realized I wasn't powerless. There was a legal path forward, even as my personal world felt destroyed. Emotionally, though, it was a different story. My mind kept replaying the memories, family celebrations, vacations with Raj and Anita. There were moments when I broke down, letting the tears flood unchecked. Sometimes, I shouted into my pillow, feeling raw anger and grief all tangled up together. Other times I just sat in silence, staring at the wall and trying to imagine what came next. Still, I made myself shift focus back to action. I began quietly tracking our shared finances, bank accounts, credit cards, anything Raj might try to hide or manipulate now that I knew the truth. I listed every major asset we had, every shared property document, and took pictures of these papers as well. If Raj tried to run or cheat me out of what was mine, I'd be ready. I refused to be a victim twice over. Through it all, I discovered something unexpected, a small spark of resilience inside me. I wasn't the same trusting person I'd been a few days ago. That woman was gone, and somebody new was beginning to emerge. If you're listening to my story, maybe you've been here too, crushed by betrayal, yet fighting to get back up. Don't forget, you have a choice: gather your strength, document everything, and protect yourself, emotionally, legally, and financially. The pain is real, but so is your power. After taking those first hard steps, every day felt like moving through a storm. Raj stayed silent, and the silence only made my anger grow. I kept asking myself, how could he ruin everything we had built? How could my own cousin Anita be part of this? I wanted answers, wanted to confront them, but I knew that fury alone wasn't enough. So instead of rushing into confrontation, I turned detective. I watched from a distance, tracking their social media accounts and online activity. I saw their smiling faces in photos, celebrating holidays and anniversaries, pretending everything was fine. It was like watching a cruel play where I was the only one who didn't know the script. Meanwhile, I confided in a few close friends, people who had stood by me through thick and thin. Their support was priceless. They reminded me that I wasn't alone, that Raj's actions were his and Anita's fault, not mine. Talking openly helped me realize the betrayal wasn't about my worth, it was about their choices. I also began documenting everything meticulously. I made lists of our shared assets and finances, including accounts Raj controlled and properties in both our names. I had to know exactly what was at stake. I wasn't just fighting for my dignity, I was fighting to protect my future and that of my children. Some days the weight was overwhelming. I cried silently when no one was watching and sometimes stared helplessly at my reflection, wondering how things had gone so wrong. Yet, I reminded myself, this betrayal didn't define me. I would reclaim my life on my terms. To everyone out there watching, remember, when life shatters your trust, don't rush to fight blindly. Gather facts, lean on those who truly care, and protect yourself in every way you can. I'll keep sharing this journey with you, showing how I moved from hurt to strength. Thank you for being here and for supporting me on this path. Your stories and words keep me going. Together, we can face even the darkest betrayals and come out stronger. My determination only deepened as I steadied myself for what lay ahead. Research became my armor. Every night after putting my children to bed, I'd read everything I could about bigamy, marriage laws, and financial rights. The more I learned, the clearer my path became. Bigamy wasn't just painful, it was illegal, and Raj had broken more than just a vow to me, he had broken the law itself. With my lawyer friend's help, I pieced together a plan. The legal process wouldn't be quick or easy, but it was a path to justice. I listed all the evidence I had, messages, emails, social media posts, travel records, and organized them into folders. Each bit of proof was like a brick in the wall I was building to protect myself and my future. I learned that anything Raj and Anita did, any property they bought or bank account they shared, could potentially be challenged in court. My lawyer advised me to remain silent with both Raj and Anita until every detail was ready. Confronting them too soon could give them a chance to hide assets or build their own defense. I felt frustrated having to contain my anger, but I knew patience would help me win in the long run. Emotionally, though, the struggle continued. Betrayal wasn't just in my mind, it sat heavy on my chest, visited me in nightmares, showed up uninvited whenever I glanced at happy family photos on the wall. Sometimes I wondered if I would ever feel normal again. But then I'd remember, this pain had to have a purpose. It was fueling my fight for justice. I kept boundaries for my own mental health. No more late night scrolling through Raj and Anita's profiles. No more dwelling on the past. I forced myself to go for walks, cook healthy meals, and spend focused time with my kids. Their laughter was a reminder that love still existed in my world. I had to be strong, not just for myself, but for them. The hardest part was pretending everything was fine to the rest of the world. At school drop-offs or family gatherings, I wore my best mask. No one guessed the chaos happening behind closed doors. Some days, I resented the silence, but in that privacy I gathered what I needed: strength, strategy, and hope. Through research, preparation, and protecting my peace, I realized betrayal didn't have to be my ending, it could be the start of something powerful. I would not let their lies ruin me, instead, I'd use every lesson for my comeback. This story isn't just about heartbreak. It's about standing tall when your world falls apart. It's about using knowledge as power, and refusing to let anyone, husband, cousin, or anyone else, write the end of your story for you. Let's keep moving ahead. There's so much more I need to share about how I turned pain into power and reclaimed my life. As I continued living under the same roof my husband and I once called home, every corner reminded me of the secrets now tangled in its walls. Still, I pressed forward with my plan, knowing details were my strongest defense. I started sorting through Raj's personal belongings whenever he was out of the house: old receipts, travel itineraries, scraps of strange notes. I found confirmation of flights, hotel bookings, and even little trinkets probably meant for Anita, not me. Each discovery made my resolve even steadier. It hurt, yes, but it also lit a fire in my soul that I hadn't felt before. I made a spreadsheet of our joint finances, tracking every transaction, even the ones that seemed boring or routine. There were bills for gifts and dinners from the weekend of his supposed business trip, payments to venues in Anita's city, even a few large ATM withdrawals that I'd never questioned before. I kept copies of everything, storing backup files online and offline. If this went to court, I wanted to be ready for any trick Raj might try. But protecting myself wasn't just about facts and figures, it was about my well-being. I realized there could be no financial plan without first guarding my heart. So, I did something I'd always put off: I opened a new bank account under just my name. I started redirecting my salary into it, making sure Raj couldn't access or control my money. It was a small step toward independence, but an important one. If he decided to cut me off suddenly, I wanted to stand on my own feet. There were moments I'd draft long, emotional letters, one to Raj, another to Anita. In those unsent letters I poured out every ounce of pain and fury, wishing they could understand what their betrayal had cost me. But after writing, I'd set those letters aside. Now wasn't the time for a confrontation that might disrupt my careful preparations. Instead, I read those words back to myself, letting them remind me of both the wounds I'd suffered and the strength I'd found. Friends became my lifeline. I called them late at night when sleep was impossible or the silence felt too loud. They helped me with practical advice, reminding me to document everything, to talk to more than one lawyer, and not to get pulled into drama with Raj or Anita directly. Their love made me realize something vital: I deserved better. I deserved respect, honesty, and peace. Sometimes, I'd look at old family photos and wonder how things could have been different. But with every painful memory, I tried to replace it with a goal for my future, a plan to protect myself and my children, to build a sense of safety again, brick by careful brick. This chapter in my journey was all about protection. Protecting my heart, my money, my assets, and most importantly, my sense of self. No matter how ugly the betrayal or how deep the scars, I realized I still had choices. I could control my next steps, even when so much felt out of my hands. For anyone listening who's been blindsided by betrayal, don't ignore the practical side of healing. Guard your resources, seek support from people you trust, and keep your focus steady. The pain doesn't vanish overnight, but step by step, you'll start feeling stronger, just like I did. Raj finally called, his voice casual, pretending nothing was wrong. My heart pounded, but I refused to sound shaken. I listened quietly as he described his work trip, every word reminding me of the evidence I'd collected: photos, hotel bills, and the marriage certificate hidden among digital files. For a moment, I almost believed he might have a reason for it all, some explanation that would make this nightmare disappear. But deep down, I knew the truth: his betrayal wasn't a mistake. It was a choice, a cold and calculated one. I waited for him to finish his story and asked, "Raj, is there anything you want to tell me?" He paused for a second, stumbled over his words, insisting everything was fine. That was when I calmly told him I knew about the wedding, every detail. I told him about the photos with Anita, about the travel bookings and the secret planning. There was silence on the line, followed by his shaky denial. "You don't understand, it's not what you think," he stammered. But with each piece of evidence I listed, his defense fell apart. Instead of apologies, I got excuses. He said he felt trapped in our marriage, he deserved happiness, he was under family pressure. Hearing his justifications was almost as painful as discovering his secret. He even begged me not to expose him, to think of the family. But I had already spent sleepless nights thinking about family, about the one he tore apart. I told him, clearly and firmly, that I was consulting lawyers and taking action. This wasn't about revenge, I said, it was about what was right, and about protecting myself and my children. His tone turned ugly then, shifting to threats, legal battles, financial sabotage, trying to guilt me for ruining everything. But I wasn't the same woman as before. For the first time, I saw that my silence had only protected his lies. Now, I would use my voice, and the law, to make him answer for what he'd done. After the call, I felt exhausted, but there was a new strength inside me. That conversation changed everything. From that moment, I made a promise to myself: I would not let fear or guilt decide my path. It was time for truth, and time for justice. This was the beginning of a new chapter, not just for my battle with Raj, but for rediscovering my courage. Even though every step felt uncertain, I knew the worst had already happened. Now, it was my turn to act. And as the days unfolded, my sense of purpose grew a little stronger, fueled by each decision I made to reclaim my life. After that tense call with Raj, I knew there was no going back to the way things were. The betrayal was out in the open, and for once, the burden of hidden pain was a little lighter. At least I wasn't alone with my secret anymore. But now came the truly hard part: turning heartbreak into action. I wasted no time. That same night, I contacted my lawyer friend Mira again, but this time I asked her to connect me with a specialist. I set up meetings with two experienced family lawyers. Each appointment felt intimidating, sitting under fluorescent lights, digging into the darkest parts of my life in front of strangers. But I reminded myself, this wasn't about shame. It was about reclaiming control. These professionals weren't there to judge me, they were there to help me fight back. The lawyers reviewed all my evidence, the digital files, messages, receipts, and marriage certificate photos. Their faces hardened as the reality set in. Raj hadn't just broken my trust, he'd broken the law. They explained step by step how we could file for divorce, how to get the second marriage declared illegal due to bigamy, and how to protect my share of assets. Their calm, methodical confidence steadied my nerves. One thing surprised me: Anita, too, was legally responsible. By knowingly entering into a marriage with my husband while our marriage was still active, she'd become complicit in the crime. I was angry at her, yes, but I'd always assumed the blame fell only on Raj. Understanding the full scope of responsibility made my resolve even stronger. They'd both have to answer for their actions. Parallel to these legal preparations, I tried desperately to find moments of peace. I took up journaling, pouring out my anger, frustration, hopes, and fears onto paper. Some days I wrote until my hand cramped. I started meditating, just 10 minutes at first, sitting in silence, letting my breath be the anchor while grief and rage passed through me. Therapy sessions followed, giving me a safe space to cry and strategize. It wasn't about getting over it, it was about surviving each day and finding small ways to heal. With every meeting, every document, every minute spent focusing on myself and my future, I grew a little stronger. I wasn't the passive, broken woman Raj and Anita had counted on. I was transforming into someone capable, determined, and unwilling to be taken advantage of again. It was a lonely road sometimes, but I kept reminding myself, this fight was for my children, my sanity, and my pride. The legal process was only beginning, and I braced myself for more battles ahead. But each step I took, every bit of evidence I organized, was another step toward justice, and toward freedom. This wasn't just the story of a betrayal. It was becoming the story of my comeback. As the legal wheels began turning, I found myself facing waves of emotion I never expected. Some days, the rage and betrayal outweighed everything. I wanted nothing more than to scream the truth from the rooftops. Other days, the emptiness was overwhelming, and all I could do was sit and listen to the clock tick down the minutes until morning. But I kept moving forward. My children needed me, and I needed to protect my sanity. One evening, my phone buzzed with a message I never thought I'd receive. It was from Anita. My fingers trembled as I read her words. She tried to sound apologetic, saying Raj had forced her into secrecy, that she never wanted to hurt me. Her justification stung more than her silence ever had. It was obvious she was trying to ease her own guilt rather than truly face what she had done. I wanted to respond and pour out my fury, shame, and heartbreak. But my legal training and the advice from my lawyers echoed in my mind: anything you write can be used as evidence. So I took a deep breath, saved the conversation in a separate folder, and made myself step away. I would not let her bait me into an emotional exchange that could be twisted later. Instead, I channeled my pain into preparation. I spent hours with my legal team, plotting out details to protect my children and my assets. I called banks, checked on property deeds, and made sure my name was on every vital document. It was exhausting, but every step made me feel a little less vulnerable and a little more in control. Children are always the silent witnesses in stories like these, and I made it my mission to shield them from the mess as much as possible. I scheduled extra activities for them, kept routines stable, and told gentle, age-appropriate truths. I watched for signs of fear or confusion, answering questions with reassurance and love. Their hugs and smiles became my lifeline, their resilience inspired me to fight harder. Outside, life moved normally. I took my kids to the park, went shopping, waved at neighbors, pretending nothing was wrong. But inside, everything was changing. No one could see the files stacked in my bedroom, or the lists taped to the inside of my closet door. No one knew the sleepless nights spent rehearsing courtroom answers, or the way I stared at the ceiling, bargaining with a universe that had upended my world. Still, there were glimmers of hope and strength. Friends and family started reaching out, some with quiet support, others with tales of their own survival after betrayal. Their honesty gave me comfort. It reminded me that heartbreak doesn't have to be the end, it can also be the start of something braver. By the end of each day, I knew I was surviving. Sometimes, that's enough. I may not have found all the answers, or the healing I craved, but with every cautious step, I was choosing to protect myself, my children, and my future. The journey was far from over, but for the first time, I felt I might actually see the other side. The months that followed pulled me in every direction, but I anchored myself to my purpose, reclaiming my life and safeguarding my children's future. The legal process was daunting and painfully slow. Each week I gathered more evidence, answered more questions for my lawyers, and filled out stacks of paperwork that seemed never-ending. Between court forms, asset disclosures, and affidavits, I found myself wishing I could just wake up from this nightmare and have my old life back. But every document I signed was another brick in the wall of protection I was building for myself and my kids. There were court dates to prepare for. I sat with my legal team, combing over timelines and details. We rehearsed possible scenarios. What if Raj tried to transfer assets? What if Anita tried to paint herself as the victim? My focus had to stay sharp. These weren't battles I could win with emotion alone. Facts and proof would be my weapons. Raj, meanwhile, avoided direct conversation whenever he could. His silence was its own kind of cruelty, the kind that says, "I'm not brave enough to face what I've done." Sometimes he sent emails through his lawyer or tried to pressure me into quick settlements he thought would go unnoticed. But by now, I was stronger. I read every line of every agreement and refused to accept anything less than what was fair. Anita stayed in the background. A few distant family members reached out, testing the waters, some hinting that I should just move on. Their words stung, but I reminded myself their judgment didn't matter. They hadn't lived my pain. Only I understood the toll it took to rebuild trust in a world turned upside down. Around this time, I found a strange strength in sharing my journey online. What started as a few private diary entries grew into videos and posts, raw, honest, and unflinching. To my surprise, a community grew around me, made up of strangers and friends alike. They offered advice, comfort, and solidarity. Some shared their own stories of betrayal and healing. For the first time, I realized I wasn't alone, not really. So many others had felt this pain, walked through the fire, and found their way out. Every small victory, like securing shared accounts or winning a motion in court, helped me breathe easier. I started planning for the future again, not in an abstract way, but practically, budgeting for my household, looking at new schools for the kids, imagining holidays where peace outweighed sorrow. Life wasn't easy, but I started to believe again that happiness was possible. This chapter of my journey was one of discipline, patience, and hope. The enemy wasn't just Raj or Anita, it was despair, fear, and self-doubt. I battled all three, every single day, with the support of those who truly cared and the determination to find justice, for myself, and for anyone listening who needs proof that survival is possible. I'll continue sharing the next steps, where resilience meets the real turning point. Thank you for staying by my side. Finding strength in the midst of chaos can sometimes feel impossible, but as the court battles dragged on, I started noticing something surprising. People began reaching out to support me in ways I never expected. Friends who had been quiet or distant before suddenly called to check up on me, offering encouragement and practical help, childcare for my kids during hearings, advice on dealing with stubborn relatives, or simply a warm meal dropped off on a bad day. Even a few family members I thought I'd lost stood by me, refusing to let the scandal tear us completely apart. Their loyalty was a lifeline, a small patch of solid ground in my uncertain world. But the support didn't come just from people I knew. Through sharing my story online, I connected with strangers, other women, and a few men who had faced their own betrayals and survived. Their messages flooded my inbox, filled with empathy, suggestions, and their own hard-won lessons. Reading their stories, I realized I wasn't as alone as I felt on my darkest days. There is a kind of invisible community that forms out of shared pain, and it gave me courage. If they could move forward, maybe I could too. I learned to rely on small routines to rebuild myself piece by piece. I set aside time every morning, even if it was only 10 minutes, to meditate and breathe. Some days I scribbled out my anger in a journal, other days, I jotted down one thing I could be grateful for: a laugh with my child, a surprising text from a friend, the quiet comfort of tea at night. It wasn't always easy, but it anchored me. There were setbacks, of course. Some days the memories would hit out of nowhere, a photo fell out of a drawer, or the kids would ask about their father and I'd stumble through the answer. But I started practicing forgiveness, not for Raj and Anita, who hadn't earned it, but for myself. I forgave myself for missing the signs, for trusting too deeply. I realized it was okay to be broken and healing at the same time. With every court hearing, as complicated and slow as they were, the sense of reclaiming my life grew. I stopped dreading legal documents and, instead, saw them as stepping stones toward a future where I would be in control again. Small acts of self-care, cooking a favorite meal, reconnecting with an old friend, even planting new flowers in my yard, became acts of defiance and hope. This chapter is about finding sunlight after months of storms, about learning that support sometimes comes from the most unexpected places, and that healing is a journey, not a destination. If anyone listening has walked a similar rocky road, remember, you can build a new life brick by brick, moment by moment, with every act of self-kindness and every connection you let in. Even after the worst betrayal, love, for yourself and from others, can begin again. With every new court date, my confidence grew just a little bit stronger. The months of careful preparation and evidence gathering were now paying off. Raj tried to play games, attempting to move assets or claim that certain belongings, sometimes even money, suddenly belonged to Anita. He and his lawyer worked hard to muddy the waters, but my legal team was ready for every twist. Armed with documents, timelines, and a clear record of events, we challenged every dubious claim. The court, seeing the evidence of bigamy and fraud, placed a freeze on our jointly held accounts and properties until the final ruling could be made. It was both a relief and a gut punch. To know your life, your savings, and home are up for legal debate because of someone else's crimes, it's overwhelming. But I clung to the knowledge that justice was slowly but surely moving my way. The law was on my side, and no amount of manipulation from Raj or Anita could change that. Outside the courtroom, I redoubled my efforts to provide stability for my children. I wanted them to feel safe, loved, and unburdened by the darkness that filled our home. I made time for simple pleasures, baking together, movie nights, quiet stories before bed. Each laugh and smile was both a victory and a reminder of everything worth fighting for. Of course, not all days were filled with hope. There were moments, especially after difficult hearings, when anxiety threatened to swallow me whole. Would the case drag on? Would Raj find some new way to twist the truth? Would I ever truly be free? In those moments, I turned to my support circle, sharing tears and fears with friends who never judged me for showing weakness. Leaning on others was not a sign of defeat, it was an essential part of surviving. All this while, Raj's and Anita's silence spoke volumes. There were no genuine apologies, no signs of remorse, only desperate attempts to hold on to what they had gained through lies. But I refused to let their avoidance define my narrative. Step by step, I was shaping a new life not just of survival, but of dignity. The journey through the legal system taught me many things: the importance of patience, the value of careful documentation, and, above all, the critical need to stand tall for what's rightfully yours. For anyone listening or reading who finds themselves in a similar nightmare, know this: there will be rough days, but with perseverance, the truth will shine through. Hold on to your dignity, document everything, and believe that justice can be done. I'll keep sharing the next parts of this journey, for as long as it takes to see it through to the end. There are some wounds that run so deep, time alone can't heal them. As I moved through each day, waiting for courtroom decisions, handling paperwork, and facing the fallout, there was one burden that never left: the emotional toll. Some nights I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how my life had unraveled so completely. Sleep became a rare guest, and the smallest things, a forgotten mug, a favorite song, could bring on a wave of sadness so strong it stole my breath. I realized slowly that I couldn't pour from an empty cup. If I broke down completely, who would hold my children together? So, I began my own quiet campaign towards self-care. Every morning, I promised myself I'd do one thing to help my heart heal: a morning walk, a favorite book, moments of deep breathing while the kids played nearby. They were small things, but together they created space for hope to grow. Food, too, became part of my recovery. I made deliberate choices for nourishing meals, sometimes inviting friends over to cook with me, turning our small kitchen into a safe haven for laughter and healing. My children didn't understand every detail, but they felt the warmth in those moments, the way our lives could still be beautiful despite the pain. Journaling became my silent therapy. I started a special notebook, one I hoped to share with my children when they were older, a record not just of heartbreak, but of how their mother stood strong, fought for truth, and never let darkness win. In those pages, I wrote letters to my future self, filled with promises to try again and make space for forgiveness, not for those who had hurt me, but for myself, for the days when I felt weak or broken or angry. Sometimes, I would ask myself, how do I keep going? The answer always came back: for my children, for myself, for the life I still deserved. Their smiles reminded me that love, real, simple, honest love, could survive even this. I read stories to them at night, listened to their worries, and made sure they knew, above all, that their world was still safe, still loving, still theirs. Bit by bit, the weight on my chest lightened. I found myself able to laugh again without guilt, to see colors return to ordinary days. The pain didn't vanish, but it didn't control me. I learned, slowly, that recovery wasn't about erasing hurt, it was about building a new life on top of it, stronger and kinder than before. For anyone listening who's facing betrayal or heartbreak, please remember that self-care isn't selfish. It's survival. It's the first step to taking your peace back. Whether you run, paint, talk it out, or simply breathe, whatever helps you feel like yourself again, cling to it. Healing may be slow, but with each gentle day, you will find life softening around the edges, letting hope back in. I promise, it does get better. And you are never truly alone. Life always has a way of testing your resolve at the moments you least expect. Just as I started regaining a sense of normalcy, Raj appeared unannounced at my doorstep. My heart lurched the instant I saw him standing there. He looked different, tired, older, burdened. Part of me wanted to slam the door in his face, but another part forced me to stand tall, to show myself, my children, and even him that I was done being scared. He began with apologies, his voice shaky but oddly rehearsed. "I made a terrible mistake," he said, eyes cast down. He pleaded for forgiveness, insisting he was manipulated, lost, overwhelmed by family expectations. He spoke about Anita, about regret, about wanting his life back. For a moment, the desperation in his voice reminded me of the man I thought I once knew. But years of love and betrayal can warp your view of right and wrong. As he spoke, all the memories, both beautiful and painful, ran through my mind. I remembered the laughter, the dreams we'd shared, the trust I'd given so freely. But I also heard the echoes of lies, the nights I cried in secret, the way he'd tried to turn fear into my silence. He begged for another chance, for the children's sake, he said. But I saw right through it, the old pattern, the hope that I would bend to peacekeeping, that I would forgive the unforgivable to maintain an illusion of family. I took a deep breath, steadied my voice, and told him the truth. "You made your choices, Raj. Choices that destroyed this family. Trust, once broken this badly, cannot be repaired with words." It was the most difficult sentence I have ever spoken. I could see the pain in his face, but I needed to honor mine. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I simply stood there as a woman who had survived and rebuilt her dignity on her own terms. I told him that, for our children's sake, I would always act in their best interests, but I would never again let myself be vulnerable to his lies. The visit was short. He left with tears in his eyes, promises on his lips, but I knew my path was forward, not backward. That moment changed something fundamental inside me. For so long, I believed I was a victim of his choices. But standing there, calm and resolute, I realized I was more than what happened to me. I was no longer just someone who was betrayed, I was someone who fought back, who rebuilt, who found her strength. In the days that followed, I felt lighter. Closing the door on Raj was symbolic, it was closure not just of a chapter, but of an identity I'd outgrown. My children noticed the change too, home became a place of peace again. Our laughter, though quieter, felt real and earned. To anyone listening, there will come a moment when you must choose you, even if it hurts. The courage it takes to say no more is the foundation on which you'll build the rest of your story. That's how I moved from heartbreak to healing, one brave decision at a time. The weeks that followed Raj's visit brought a new kind of quiet, a quieter home, yes, but also a quieter mind. The constant tension was gone, replaced by a sense of peace that I'd almost forgotten was possible. With Raj out of my everyday life, the waves of anger and confusion finally began to settle. There was still the legal process, documents to sign, hearings to attend, and plenty of paperwork to deal with, but the drama that used to choke every moment lost its grip. For once, the future didn't feel terrifying. It felt open. I began to focus on rebuilding the parts of my life that betrayal had shattered. I reached out to old friends I'd lost touch with, explaining as much or as little as I wanted, and finding more warmth than judgment. I picked up a few hobbies I'd let slip away over the years, painting quietly in the mornings after the kids left for school, reading books that transported me to better worlds, and rekindling a laughter that felt both new and familiar. Sometimes it was as simple as tuning into my favorite music while cooking dinner, letting myself dance in the kitchen without the weight of secrets holding me down. The court hearings were slow, almost painfully so, but each one drew me closer to closure. My lawyers kept me informed, my evidence folders worked in my favor, and day by day I felt more in control. I no longer saw court as a battlefield but as the final step in a journey of reclaiming what was rightfully mine. Seeing Raj across the room during legal proceedings no longer scared or angered me, it simply reminded me of how far I had come. He was a chapter now, not my entire story. What surprised me most was how life outside of all this gradually started feeling like mine again. The small joys, morning cuddles with my kids, coffee with friends, the satisfaction of checking a task off my list, became more meaningful. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. And while betrayal was still a wound, it was healing, closing over as fresh hope began to grow. Toward those final stages, I made a conscious effort to celebrate little milestones. Each completed legal form, every supportive friend, each peaceful night was its own small victory. I even allowed myself to dream, to imagine new traditions with my family, solo travel in places I'd always wanted to see, new risks and adventures that were mine alone to choose. If there's one thing I want to say for anyone enduring their own storm, it's this: you can build happiness again. Not as a replacement for what was lost, but as a testament to what you survived. My daily life, once filled with suspicion and pain, was blossoming into something brighter, one day at a time. This chapter is about rediscovery, about realizing you are allowed to feel joy again after chaos. It's about slowly, bravely, building a new life, not defined by what broke you but by how you heal. Court days always brought a chill, no matter how prepared I felt. The sterile hallways, the wait outside a room where strangers would decide my future, these things would have rattled me in the past. But by now, I'd built a kind of shield around myself. It wasn't armor made of anger or bitterness, but one made from quiet resolve and dignity. I knew the truth was on my side, even if the process was long and sometimes cruel. During one particular hearing, Raj's lawyer tried a new tactic, attacking my character. He pried into my private life, asking about my friendships, my habits, even the nights I cried alone at home. For a moment, his words stung, like needles meant to reopen old wounds. I felt the heat rise to my face, shame threatening to undo weeks of steady progress. But I stayed composed, listening to the barrage without letting it break me. When it was my turn, I answered every question with calm clarity. I didn't let them twist my story, nor did I lose my temper. I looked the judge in the eye as I explained how I'd protected my children, documented everything, and made decisions not out of revenge, but out of necessity. I wanted the courtroom, and anyone who ever heard my story, to know that I'd chosen to fight back with dignity, not hate. Walking out of that hearing, I felt surprisingly light. Those who try to weaponize our pain can only succeed if we hand them that power. I realized that protecting my dignity, especially when hurt or wrongly accused, wasn't just about proving something to others. It was about proving something to myself. I was no longer the devastated woman Raj and Anita expected me to be. I had become someone who could face the hardest questions and still stand tall. These court moments were exhausting, but they helped me grow. They taught me that true dignity isn't loud or vengeful, it's the quiet strength of knowing your worth, no matter who tries to tear you down. As the legal process rolled on, I held on to that lesson, letting it shape my words, my attitude, even my hopes for the future. The fight was nowhere near over, but I knew that no matter what happened in that courtroom, I wouldn't lose myself again. For anyone facing the scrutiny of others, especially when their story is twisted or their character is questioned, remember, you have the right to defend your dignity. Sometimes the bravest thing you'll ever do is tell the truth, calmly and firmly, even when the world is set against you. That's what kept me moving forward, one hearing at a time, toward the peace and justice I so fiercely deserved. Just when I thought I had faced every possible challenge, another wave hit, this time, aimed not at me, but at my children. I learned from a concerned relative that Anita had been trying to draw my kids into her new life with Raj, creating confusion and tension. For all her claims of remorse, Anita's actions risked pulling my children into an emotional tug-of-war they never chose. It hurt more than any courtroom drama. Each time my kids came home with questions about why family felt different or why they saw less of certain relatives, my heart ached. I knew children process pain differently, sometimes their sadness came out in tantrums or nightmares, sometimes just in silent withdrawal. It became my mission to shield them from further hurt. I reached out to a child counselor, not because I doubted my own strength as a mother, but because I knew love alone wouldn't always be enough. I listened as the counselor reminded me how vital routine and honest, age-appropriate conversations could be. I learned to answer my children's questions with clarity and warmth, assuring them that no matter what changed outside, their core family would remain loving and safe. I set new boundaries, making it clear to Raj, through legal channels, that any contact with the children had to be on my terms. I explained to my kids that sometimes adults make mistakes, but those mistakes were not their fault. I reaffirmed, daily, their right to feel all their feelings, anger, confusion, sadness, and promised to stay by their side through every storm. Motherhood became my rock. Even on the days I wanted to collapse, I found a second wind for my children. Their laughter was my victory, their resilience my reward. Through playdates, crafts, and gentle conversation, I helped them cope and, in the process, found new channels of healing for myself. Through this chapter, I realized protecting our loved ones sometimes means standing even taller when we'd rather hide. I held on to hope and fought for a peace that lasted longer than any fleeting hardship. The role of a mother, more than anything else, showed me just how strong and selfless I could be. To anyone walking a similar path, please never underestimate your ability to shield and nurture those you love, even when you feel broken. Your steady presence is a gift that outshines any storm. This period wasn't just about my fight for justice, it became my journey as a parent, teaching my children, and myself, what true love and protection really mean. As the courthouse sessions dragged on and the legal dust started to settle, I felt a deep shift within myself. Each appearance in front of the judge, each exchange of evidence, was less daunting than the one before. My confidence, once chipped away by betrayal, was now being rebuilt with every hard-fought step forward. There were even days I could look at Raj and Anita, sitting together, whispering nervously, and feel only sadness for what they'd chosen, rather than the ache of fresh anger. One afternoon, after a particularly tense hearing, I sat down to write Anita a letter. Not a letter of accusation or rage, I'd spilled enough of those words into my journals already, but one that simply laid out what I needed to say. I told her, without venom, that I wished she'd chosen honesty. That the bond of family, once destroyed, could not be reconstructed on secrets and lies. I admitted my pain and disappointment, but also told her that our relationship would likely never be repaired. It wasn't about hatred, it was about surviving. Before sealing the letter, I reread it, marveling at how my words weren't jagged and raw anymore. They had become clear, even gentle. I let go of the angry, fractured version of myself that her betrayal had birthed. On the home front, I kept holding both myself and my children steady. I offered them reassurance, and I told them that even when families break apart, truth and kindness matter more than resentment. In quiet moments, I wrote in my journal about boundaries, how important they'd become, not just with Raj and Anita, but with others who tried to force reconciliation or minimize our pain. The more I honored my limits, the more peace and clarity I found as I moved forward. The legal process wasn't completely over, but the hardest battles were behind me. Friends and strangers following my journey online kept sending encouraging words. Some told me how my willingness to speak up empowered them to set their boundaries and to choose healing over bitterness. Each message reminded me that our pain, when processed with courage and honesty, could become a source of light for someone else. With each passing day, I wrote more letters, to myself, to my children, and even to the versions of Raj and Anita that once belonged to happier times. Those letters weren't always meant to be sent, they were my way of telling my truth and releasing the need for others' understanding or apology. To those listening to my story, there will come a day when you must tell someone your truth, not for their benefit, but for your own. Whether it's in a quiet letter you never send, or a conversation you finally have, you'll find relief and even a measure of closure. That's how I found the strength to move from surviving to thriving, and how I learned that my voice, honest, clear, and steady, was the truest part of my recovery. Finally, after what felt like an endless journey through heartbreak and courtrooms, the case drew to its conclusion. The day of the final verdict arrived, one last, nerve-wracking appearance in court. I wore my best, stood tall, and walked into that room carrying not just folders of evidence but the weight of everything that had happened. My heart thudded in my chest, not just with fear, but with the faintest flicker of hope, too. When the judge issued the ruling, time slowed. Raj's second marriage to Anita was declared illegal, null and void from the start. The relief of hearing those words brought tears to my eyes. It wasn't just about legal jargon, it was a public recognition that what I'd suffered was real, that my pain carried weight, and that justice, however imperfect, still existed. The divorce was granted, too, officially ending the marriage Raj had broken long before. I was awarded my share of the assets, ensuring my children and I would be free from financial manipulation or fear. In that moment, I didn't feel victorious in a vengeful way. Instead, I felt released. Years of anxiety, the dread, the shame, the second-guessing, released their grip. I walked out of the courthouse with a new lightness inside me. There were no celebratory banners or applause, just a quiet sense of dignity and a certainty that, at long last, I'd chosen to fight for myself and won. Raj avoided my gaze as we left, and Anita was nowhere to be seen. I realized then that I had been searching for closure not in their apologies, but in my own steady resolve and in the truth I had stood for, even when the world tried to cloud it. The love and safety I felt from my children as I hugged them that evening were worth more than any courtroom victory. After the verdict, we went home to a house that, for the first time in a long while, truly felt like ours, a place free of secrets, shadows, and dread. I let myself cry, tears of relief and exhaustion, but also gratitude. For every setback and sleepless night, I had rebuilt a life marked not by betrayal, but by bravery. If there's one thing this journey proved, it's that justice can be won, not always quickly, not always in every way you deserve, but enough to let you breathe freely again. Now, finally, I could start thinking about the future, not as someone who survived pain, but as someone ready to pursue joy again. This isn't the story of a happy ending in the usual sense. But it's the story of a new beginning, a new freedom, a hard-won peace, and a future that belongs to me and my children. For anyone who feels trapped by injustice, keep going. The path is long, but the other side does exist, and you, too, will find your own kind of victory. Life after the verdict brought a strange kind of calm, one that felt both unfamiliar and deeply welcome. Legally, the battle was over. Raj and Anita were finally, truly out of my life in every official way. But emotional healing was a slower process, unfolding in small moments that marked my journey back to myself. At first, the house felt too quiet. For years, its walls had echoed with tension and uncertainty, and now that the storm had passed, I had to learn how to exist without looking over my shoulder. I rearranged furniture, painted bedrooms, and opened windows wide to let in sunlight and fresh air. These weren't just home improvements, they were symbolic acts, reclaiming every space as my own. My children, too, seemed lighter. Their laughter returned, tentative at first, then stronger and more frequent. We made new memories: Sunday morning pancakes, movie nights, birthday parties filled with genuine joy rather than forced smiles. Raj and Anita became like characters from another life, a chapter I'd closed with intention and care. Their absence was a relief, not a loss. Occasionally, I'd catch a glimpse of them in a photo from the past or hear a rumor through distant relatives, but I felt no pull to revisit what was done. Instead, I focused on new goals, learning a new skill, planning small trips, setting hopes for our little family's future. There were setbacks, of course. Some days, shadows of doubt crept back in: would I trust again? Would I ever truly be over the betrayal? But each time those thoughts surfaced, I reminded myself of how far I'd come, from confusion and heartbreak to legal victory, from survival to genuine renewal. I leaned into the support of friends both old and new, and reconnected with family on my terms. I nurtured stronger boundaries and let go of the burden to explain or justify my story to anyone. Instead, I held my truth quietly, proof of strength, evidence that even the deepest pain could spark new growth. For my children, I became more than a protector, I became an example. They saw that adversity could be faced and overcome, that resilience isn't about never falling but about rising each time you do. Together, we celebrated milestones, big and small, building a life marked by peace and possibility instead of secrets and shame. As I reflect on this chapter, I wish anyone listening could feel the hope that comes with starting over, not denying the scars, but recognizing the beauty in healing. The world is full of new beginnings. Even after betrayal, even after loss, life can become something bright and honest and yours again. That has become the greatest lesson and the truest reward of all. As I sit here telling you this final chapter, I can't help but feel a mix of relief, pride, and hope. My story started with heartbreak so deep I thought it might break me forever, but it's ending with something much greater, a sense of freedom and strength I never imagined possible. If you've stayed with me this far, thank you. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe if this story has touched your heart. And I truly want to hear from you. How would you rise after betrayal? Your voices matter, and together, we make sure no one goes through this kind of pain alone. The days now are filled with new beginnings. I wake up to laughter, mine and my children's, unburdened by secrets or lies. The pain is still there sometimes, like a scar that aches during storms, but it no longer defines my days. I spend mornings over slow breakfasts, talking with my children about dreams for the future, college, adventures, love that's comfortable, honest, and real. We make plans to travel, to learn together, and sometimes, just enjoy the gift of a peaceful home. I look in the mirror and see someone different. The woman there isn't the same trusting wife who ignored her doubts or the broken soul who stared into the dark. She's someone who knows her worth. Someone who fought for justice, for her children, and for herself, even when it meant standing alone. My healing isn't perfect, and I don't expect it ever will be. But I am whole in ways I never thought I'd be again. To all of you listening right now, betrayal isn't the end of your story. You can lose everything you thought you needed, only to discover that what's left is more than enough to build something stronger and truer. I hope my journey shows you that courage sometimes comes quietly, in small choices every day, standing your ground, reaching for help, believing in better even when the night is darkest. Let's talk in the comments. Have you survived betrayal or heartbreak? What helped you get through it, and who are you now because of it? Your stories might just become someone else's survival guide, or the push they need to choose hope. Thank you for supporting me, for sharing your struggles and victories, and for reminding me that healing is not just possible, but powerful. Stay strong, keep your heart open, and know that no matter where you are in your journey, brighter days can and will return. This is not just my story, maybe it's yours too. Thank you for letting me share it, and for helping me prove that, even after the worst storms, hope can win.